here at... Hello and welcome to this round 15, the final round of the Swiss here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. There are a lot of very big names in our feature match area, none bigger than these two, Martin Juser versus Martin Müller. The winner will be in our top 8. The loser will have to be watching from the bleachers. It's Elves versus Blue-Red Storm, two decks that, aside from casting lots of spells, couldn't be more different. Yeah, actually interesting. Also, definitely among the lower represented decks in the tournament this weekend. Martin Juser's Elves deck has got a big upgrade with the help of Vizier of Remedies, potentially enabling him to go infinite, if you will. Martin Müller's deck, kind of a classic Storm deck, not really had too much in the way of updates from Amonkhet, but Baral, Chief of Compliance, has been a big pickup for the Blue-Red Storm deck. It means that there are 8 creatures that reduce the cost of spells, and they tend to be instrumental in the one big turn where the Storm deck goes off. And here it's going to be a race who can pull off the combo faster, and for Martin it doesn't really matter if the combo is infinite mana or just exploding with the elf lords. But of course Martin does maybe have the chance to delay we're gonna have to go with Juser and Müller on this one. Müller might have the chance to delay what Juser is doing by, let's say, if he has a grape shot and he just wraths Juser's board, that buys him a lot of time. Martin, on the other hand, will not have too many ways to interact with what the Blue-Red Storm deck is doing. Martin Juser, that is. So yeah, Juser doing a fairly straightforward job of getting to his end game, whether that be swarming the board with elves or generating infinite mana thanks to Vizier of Remedies and Devoted Druid. On the other side of things, Martin Müller is kind of in goldfish mode, unless he decides that he needs to use Grape Shot to clear things out a little bit. And Martin Müller is looking at some very successful tournaments in the past, so he really wants to add some GP points to his resume this season. And I believe that Martin Juser from this event has already picked up the extra points that he needs to be confident of Platinum by the end of the season. Heritage Druid, meaning that then Dwinen's Elite coming along, gets to use the ability of Devoted Druid to untap it, then letting everything get tapped again. Elvish Archdruid now coming down, so empty-handed, Martin Juser just activates Horizon Canopy, passes things back. This is the kind of pressure that he needed to put on Martin Müller. However, the Blue-Red Storm deck, if it gets to untap with a cost reduction creature in play, can surprisingly frequently just win the game. We will see if Martin Müller is able to do that here. The key pieces of the puzzle when it comes to winning the game with Baral in play are a couple of early rituals into Gifts Ungiven. Gifts Ungiven most frequently, assuming no disruption, fetching a Manamorphose, a couple of rituals, and a copy of Past in Flames. That then means that the graveyard is live to cast all those spells again and kind of go off in one big flurry of spells. Manamorphose here, the first play from Müller. Storm count 1. And that Manamorphose, in addition to drawing a card for Müller, also a net gain of 1 mana for him, as it costs 1 to cast and generates 2 mana upon resolution. Müller is still doing some math here. So it looks like he has Storm count 1, 1 red and 1 blue mana after having cast the first spell of the turn. This Pyretic Ritual now meaning that spending 1 red to generate 2, so 3 red, 1 blue. We're using tokens just to denote the color of mana available. And Goblin Electromancer followed by a Grape Shot. So this is basically Martin saying, I don't think that I'm going to be able to kill you with what I've got going on, but I'm going to put you back far enough that hopefully I can have another bite of the cherry later. Yeah, and this goes in the direction that I was mentioning. Müller, with his Grape Shots, has the chance to delay Juser's game plan. There are still elves on the battlefield, but these ones not the big concerns for Martin Müller. Having to deal with things like Elvish Archdruid, Heritage Druid, Devoted Druid, those are the big ones that create huge explosive turns. Yeah, all of the elves on the battlefield are effectively vanilla creatures at this stage. Azuri Renegade Leader comes down. It has lots of abilities, but none of them
going to do too much just yet. Sleight of hand here coming from Martin Müller as he rebuilds following his small storm of spells on the previous turn.
And Müller is desperately looking for Gifts Ungiven, or maybe even Past in Flames could be lethal also. But he needs some way to generate card advantage now.
Gifts Ungiven would only cost 2 mana at present with both Baral and Goblin Electromancer in play. Not too many spells in Martin Müller's deck that actually get cheaper with the second cost reduction, because 2 is kind of the high watermark for most things, but Past in Flames and Gifts Ungiven do qualify.
Not so easy to play for Yuza either, because the Izuri doesn't really work on this board on its own. You need the 5 mana, and none of your creatures are mana outs, which is actually very rare.
There is a Westphal Abbey down there chilling out in the land zone for Martin Yuza. At some point, if he has enough creatures in play, he can potentially transform that into Ormondal Profane Prince.
Yeah, but I think he's actually working towards triple green here. He wants to just be able to activate Izuri.
Yeah, winning the old-fashioned way with elves. Hey,
well,
if it works.
If it forces one chump block, the danger is that you give your opponent one more turn. But I think Müller is kind of getting flooded here. Maybe he drew a Past in Flames now.
He does appear to have Past in Flames. If that's the case, then he'll fire off as many spells as he can before casting it, so that he can have the maximum amount of flashback. Storm count 1, 3 red mana available. Spends 2 of that 3 in order to cast Past in Flames. So now every spell currently in the graveyard has flashback. Any future spells cast will not have flashback until an inevitable flashback on Past in Flames, if you see what I mean.
And he is going off here quite efficiently. Everything he draws that goes into the graveyard this turn, he might even be able to flash back.
I believe that there is now a Gifts Ungiven available to him. Martin Yuza just watching on. No cards in hand, so the equivalent of pressing F6 on Magic Online and just watching to make sure that Martin Müller is able to execute on this combo. So Gifts Ungiven, typically we would expect to see 3 rituals and a Past in Flames if you were sort of partway starting the combo. Just goes for a Grape Shot here in addition to 3 rituals. And more often than not, when Blue-Red Storm is going off and casting Gifts Ungiven, there isn't really a split that you can put together that's going to mean that you are able to survive. Worth double checking, but in this case, Martin Yuza simply scoots his cards up. He knows that he's defeated for game 1. We will be back with game 2 from these two powerhouses of the game soon enough, but for now, these messages. Hello and welcome back to this, the final round of the Swiss here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Simon Gertzen. We've already seen one game between Martin Müller and Martin User. We're going to get a chance to see the second soon enough after they've finished sideboarding. We've got a little bit of synchronized magic going on in our feature match area, players at all the tables shuffling. So we're going to have a little think about sideboarding here in terms of what these two players have going on. Are we likely to see major changes between these two decks after sideboards?
Not major changes. No, both of these players want to play their own game as well as possible. So I would expect them to sideboard maybe 3 or 4 cards that help them disrupt their opponents. We could see some mass removal from Müller's side. I don't know which sideboard cards User has access to. Maybe he has to rely on the white splash to have something reasonable. What I don't expect is, for example, a card like Grafdigger's Cage, because User is himself relying on getting creatures out of his library with powerful instants.
Yeah, some kind of graveyard hate definitely seems like a reasonable place to start for Martin User, because without Past in Flames, it's definitely fiddly for the Storm deck to go off. However, of course, one of the things with Storm is some of the sideboarding is planning for what your opponent has to stop you. It becomes kind of a second-guessing game at that point.
But if you have access to a card like Rest in Peace, it's actually quite good against Blue-Red Storm, because it just makes Gifts Ungiven and Past in Flames so much less effective. However, I don't know how reliable the White Splash is in User's deck.
Yeah, he has so many spells that cost a single green or triple green that he can't afford to be devoting the likes of, for example, basic planes in any great quantity. So we'll find out soon enough. These players drawing their opening hands. Looks like Martin Müller not too happy with his opening 7. On the draw, he will be down to at most 6. Martin User just having a sit back. Looks like his 7 might be good enough.
And Martin certainly doesn't want to dilute his deck in any way. He relies on the elf synergies, and he always has this combo that he's threatening. So if he plays a turn 2 Devoted Druid, and Müller answers with a turn 2 Baral, which is of course a good start, then User is already threatening a lethal if he has the infinite mana combo, for example, with the Court of Calling.
This a matchup where potentially just having access to more copies of Vizier of Remedies might be kind of interesting, just so that you have more potential for the very explosive start. Obviously, with Court of Calling, it's a lot easier to put together than one might initially expect based on only having one Vizier of Remedies, but we'll see how that actually shakes out as these players look like they're just about ready to kick things off. Martin Müller is scrying here after having taken a mulligan 6. That card goes to the bottom, and Martin User very quick to play Cavern of Souls, naming Elves, and an Elvish Mystic. Lose the delta of the play there for Martin Müller. Looking back as User having a little bit of a think as to what he wants to do here. It looks like he's got a few different land options just to begin with. Doesn't go with Horizon Canopy, wants to keep his life total high where he can. Plays Azuri, Renegade Leader.
Not the strongest turn 2 play.
Yeah, Azuri, until the point where you have critical mass of elves or mana, is a 3 mana 2/2. And this is a matchup where Pyroclasm can sometimes catch the elves player off beat a little bit. What does Müller have for turn 2? If he plays one of his cost reduction creatures, he at least threatens to have a big turn on the following turn. Let's see if that's the option he goes with. Simon Nielsen there, another Danish player that was on the team that won the World Magic Cup with Martin Müller a good few years ago now, watching on. There is Goblin Electromancer, and we also got a Dismember going on there.
Nope. Paying 4 life is a hefty price. Of course, the discount from Goblin Electromancer making that possible.
How did he get up to 3 mana there?
No, he played Goblin Electromancer.
Yes.
That reduced the cost of Dismember by 1. He paid 4 life, sorry, and that's a hefty price to pay to get rid of Elvish Mystic. But because this Azuri was not really threatening anything on this board, it was, I think, good tempo play.
Dwinnen's elite, meaning that Martin User is kind of on the beatdown draw rather than combo, and I'm not sure that that's going to be effective in this kind of a race.
And Martin is holding at least a Gifts Ungiven, which probably wouldn't win on this turn, but it's a very good start. And Yuza's deck is not really made to kill opposing tutus.
Martin Müller just needs a small amount of resources more to be able to finish things off. Gifts Ungiven generates a lot of spells.
This is where Yuza needs at least a sideboard card now. His draw has been quite weak up to this point.
And Martin Müller just making sure if you're playing a blue-red Storm deck in a situation like this and you have a kind of percentage chance of winning this turn versus a much higher percentage the following turn, how much of the skill in this deck is actually about just knowing when to go for it rather than being able to execute?
I think it really depends on the matchup, right? Against certain decks, it's almost trivial to decide if you might die next turn. Against elves, I think Martin did it in game 1 already. He saw the Aziri and he saw the threat of the 5 mana activation, but at the same time he knew that Yuza was not even was just short some mana, and he could do the exact math. So what if my opponent plays a forest? What if he activates Aziri? Do I die or not? And here he's doing kind of the same thing. He needs to cast Gifts Ungiven, which is the 1 extra turn he needs. And here, Yuza, if he activates the overrun ability, I think it's just not lethal, and that's the crux.
Heritage Druid, one of the more combo-centric elves in Martin Yuza's deck. If he had more cheap elves to cast here, it would potentially threaten a problematic amount of mana, but I'm not sure that that's the case here. Dwinnen's Elite does effectively generate mana for Martin's user here. Brings along an Elf Warrior. It and the Dwinnen's Elite and the Heritage Druid can all tap for mana this turn, in spite of having just been cast.
And now do you generate 6 mana and sacrifice all your creatures?
Interesting. Worth noting that Ormondal Profane Prince has lifelink, so if Martin User did use Westvale Abbey, transform it, attack in, not only would he put Martin Müller in virtual check, but he would go up quite a bit of life, and the Storm deck occasionally can struggle to fully go off.
It's happening. I don't know if it's going to be enough, but it's really cool to see Ormondal come down here in Modern.
Yeah, it's something that when I saw Westvale Abbey in play for Martin User last game, I thought, how often does this ever really happen for the Elves deck? Right now, it is the play.
The problem is Martin is on 2, and the life gain that User got there, if Müller really goes off, 28 life is not really much more of a problem than 20 is, or 18.
Yeah, because we're not necessarily actually talking about storming 28 spells. What could happen in this scenario is storming to 10, 11, 12, 13, and then having the 14th be a grape shot and the 15th be another grape shot, and getting the 29 points of damage across 2 iterations of the big storm spell.
Yeah, and now, at least now you're posing a question to Müller, which I like. You're saying, look, do your thing, but I'm on the highest possible life total and I have an indestructible flyer, as opposed to this army of elves with you still being on 11.
And Müller quite carefully considering what he wants to do here. I think the classic pile, the 3 rituals Past in Flames, is an interesting option.
I think he has a Past in Flames in hand.
At which point he gets effectively a free slot, picks up a grape shot there. He may well have already determined that he needs to be casting multiple grape shots in order to close this one out.
So in general, you don't want your opponent to be drawing cards, extra cards, and you don't want your opponent to cast multiple grape shots or the same grape shot multiple times.
For that reason, are we expecting to see the rituals go to hand and the other two go to the graveyard?
Yeah, it would be nice if you could just restrict your opponent on mana, but this against an Electromancer and an opponent untapping freely basically is just unrealistic. So it's better to try to fight on the axis of cards and win conditions.
Well, when you start casting Desperate Ritual and splicing Desperate Ritual onto it, yeah, red mana is no longer remotely a concern.
Exactly, and this is actually not the strongest turn for Müller when you consider that he had only a few rituals and the Past in Flames in hand. However, he will get to cast Gifts Ungiven from his graveyard, and I think that will make the difference this game.
Yeah, we see Martin Müller getting up to 7 Storm in no time at all, and the second Gifts Ungiven, at that point he'll have so much fuel. He has the opportunity at some point to flash back the Past in Flames that's in his graveyard. That will then mean that he has just even the spells that he's got following the first Past in Flames cast will have flashback.
So in this case, if he just goes for Gifts Ungiven, which is very similar to the one we just saw, it might already be lethal. So Mana Morphor's interesting. You just get another gift to threaten to win with that, or if you put it in the graveyard, you still have the option to flash it back with Past in Flames.
Yeah, hard to run out of gas when you have not infinite, but a very large amount of mana and a very large amount of copies of Gifts Ungiven, which can in turn fetch one another.
I think Müller is actually just explaining to user how dead he is, based on the
body language there from Martin Müller is that this is a fait accompli at this point. He hasn't literally won the game, but he has all of the tools, and if there's no disruption from Martin User here, which I struggle to imagine what there could be, it really shouldn't matter too much how these piles are split.
The surprise surgical extraction?
I have used the surprise surgical extraction against Storm in the past, and it's definitely one that can be problematic for them, but I think that it would have needed to have come a little earlier than this.
I was thinking maybe still in the grape shots.
Yeah. There are not very many ways for the Storm deck to win once grape shot is not a factor. Storm currently 11, 10 red mana, 3 blue mana just hanging out, and Past in Flames is flashback, so everything now live. There's 2 grape shots available to be cast. It's just a matter of Martin Müller being able to count up high enough with his Storm count and not pull the trigger on those grape shots too early. No danger of that, though.
He has been doing this all weekend, so
it's definitely a fun thing to do. I've played my fair share of Storm over the years, and it's one of those decks that I kind of prefer playing it face to face than I do online, because I like to be able to kind of smile and wink at my opponent as I carry on going off, rather than have them just sort of make a cup of tea and leave me be. Martin Müller picking up the win there, relatively straightforward fashion against the Elves deck. 2 combo decks, one of them just a little bit quicker in this instance.
No, I think this match could go either way, but Müller demonstrated that he knows what he's doing with Blue-Red Storm, beating Elves and Martin User, who apparently cannot make top 8 every time he's playing a GP.
Apparently not. News to me. Timo Halonen on Titan Shift is against Nicholas Holtman on Jun Death Shadow, also in our feature match area. This one is going to a game 3, and Holtman with a Tarmogoyf coming down there, but look at the amount of lands that Halonen has going on compared to what Holtman's working with here. With 7 lands already in play, Scape Shift is a clear and present threat.
Oh, absolutely, and also Halonen seems to have flooded a little bit, and now he gets the Titan, so the tables have turned here.
Looks like Ranger of Eos is in hand for Nicholas Holtman. He would have the opportunity to rebuild if he just had lands in play, but the lands all on the other side of the battlefield, really. And at this point, already 1, 2, 3, 4 mountains in play. We're starting to look at Valakut territory, and at that point, games end fairly quickly.
But this fetch line will only get mountain number 5, right? Or
I believe so. This is Hallinan kind of saying, I haven't got you dead this turn, but I've got a great blocker, and when it subsequently attacks...
No, what I'm saying is you shouldn't fetch. You should use the Primeval Titan trigger first, so that you immediately go from 4 to 6, get all the triggers, and then next turn you... okay, that explains it. He had another land drop. Okay, then it makes sense to get rid of the blocker.
And there's the handshake. Timo Hallinan very pleased with that win against Nicholas Holtman. Jundeth Shadow falling to Titan Shift. And at 13-2, Timo Hallinan ought to be in great shape to be in our top 8. He was 4th in the Swiss prior to that result.
Look at this opponent match win percentage, 77%.
Wow.
He has been playing against tough opposition all weekend. Wow, that's incredible. If your opponents win almost 80% of their matches, that's pretty crazy.
That's the highest level of that anywhere on our standings
on the whole
I can
page.
see.
That's just absurdly high. Yeah.
Well, these guys, results falling thick and fast. We'll be back with a little bit more Magic for you, but first, these messages. Hello and welcome back to coverage of Grand Prix Copenhagen. I am Tim Willoughby, joined as always by Simon Gertson. We've had 2 quick matches, but we've got a little bit more magic saved up for you in this final round. Let's head back down to the feature match area for a little bit of time-walked magic. So here we have Remy Lefrancois on Dredge up against Lasse Andersen on Burn. 2 strategies that can potentially be pretty quick and aggressive, but operating on very different axes. Remy Lefrancois, we've seen him in the feature match area quite a bit with his Dredge deck. It's a deck that has a good matchup against Death Shadow. How's its matchup against Burn look, do you think?
I think it's 50-50. You have certain things which are in Dredge's favor, which is the fact that you can beat an Eidolon without basically ever casting spells. You have some powerful sideboard cards in Gnaw to the Bone, which is usually not a part of the main deck, but who knows, maybe Remy is even playing one. On the other hand, sometimes the Dredge deck is just not explosive enough, so it's playing more like a value game plan, and then Lasse can take advantage of that and burn Remy out.
So Remy started things off with an insolent Neonate. That potentially means that he can start dredging from this very first turn. Lasse Andersen has an Arid Mesa. Let's see which 1-drop he's got going for him. Gets just a basic unglued mountain here. Has he got the Goblin Guide?
No, unfortunately, whatever creature he plays, it wouldn't even deal damage this turn, most likely, because Neonate is there to be sacrificed.
Yeah, while there is Menace on the Neonate, I almost feel like that's kind of a bit of a bluff on Wizard of the Coast part. Most of the time, you're not looking to be attacking with it, at least in this deck, just there to get that dredge going. So Goblin Guide attacks, and immediately Remy Lefrancois reveals the top card of his deck. It's a Bloodghast. A block and a sacrifice, discarding Stinkweed Imp, dredging Stinkweed Imp, so that Bloodghast going to the graveyard, which is exactly where Remy Lefrancois wants it, alongside a copy of Cathartic Reunion. Didn't really want that in there. Faithless Looting, Life from the Loam, and Prized Amalgam, though, all of them in the graveyard is great news.
Yeah, and Remy seems to have that second land that he needs, which means he gets back 3 lands with Life from the Loam, he gets back the Bloodghast, and Prized Amalgam will come back.
So we were talking about whether or not there's an explosive start going to come from Dredge. I think this qualifies.
Yeah, this is explosive enough for sure. You can already see that if Lasse were to play the Eidolon in his hand on turn 2, it's not clear if that would actually be beneficial for him.
Yeah, the Burn deck doesn't run any spells that cost more than 3. Meanwhile, the Dredge deck, while it is typically fairly low to the ground in terms of the cost of the spells it casts, it doesn't necessarily need to cast very many spells.
No, and Conflagrate even gets around the Eidolon if you discard enough cards.
Gets around it in a few ways, one of those ways being costing a lot, the other way being killing it so your future spells don't even need to worry about it.
So now Lasse will have to play a really weird race where he knows he will get overrun by zombies if things go long enough.
Conflagrate on top.
Yeah, and that will also land in the graveyard.
Yeah, Dakmor Salvage and Life from the Loam dredgers in the graveyard for Remy Lefrancois. Lasse Andersen fetched a mountain last turn. Let's see how many non-basics he really needs. Gets a Sacred Foundry because I think he does have a Boros Charm that he's going to have to use at some point.
He needs the white source, otherwise it's hopeless. I'm wondering whether he has to try to Lightning Helix the Amalgam because it might buy him more time.
Casts Eidolon of the Great Revel, so we're now in a very strange kind of a damage race.
Yes, very strange indeed.
Life from the Loam, the dredge there.
Huh.
Wow. In addition to the Conflagrate that Lasse Andersen knew about, Prized Amalgam and Narcomoeba working tandem very nicely indeed for Remy Lefrancois there.
Yeah, Remy got exactly what he needed. He got the Amalgam with the Bloodghast in the first time. Now he's getting a second one for free with an Narcomoeba, and he can just start to think about discarding for Conflagrate. I would probably, because his board is looking so great, I would probably just fire off a huge Conflagrate here. just take no risks. You deal with both of your opponent's creatures. Depending on your hand, you even deal some extra damage to Lasse. And what is the burn player going to do?
Everything coming up Remy right now. Lasse Anderson going to 11. If he takes one more point, then any future Bloodghasts will have haste.
I think he will take a few more points pretty soon.
It seems fairly likely. I mean, that Conflagrate can easily get very big indeed. The Life from the Loams keeping Remy Lefrancois' hand pretty well stocked.
Okay, and now Remy is explaining to Lasse that the Conflagrate has a casting cost of red XX. So, because he's discarding, 6 or 7 cards, the casting cost of this card is actually more in the Embercool range. Which means that the Eidolon doesn't trigger.
Now that's the sort of thing that, if I wasn't familiar with it in this sort of a situation, I would double check with a judge. It's obviously one of the things that the judges are here to do, is to make sure that everything gets played appropriately.
It's a little bit of a weird interaction because, well, for one thing, you know that X is considered 0, except when things are on the stack. But here it's important to also understand that the flashback, the way that it's cast by flashback, doesn't affect the casting costs. It's still the term in the upper right hand corner, and then X is of course counted.
So everything working out there fairly well for Remy, less well it must be said for Lasse Anderson. He does have a Lightning Helix to work with here, which will buy him a little bit of time, but pointing it at creatures is a temporary measure at best for Lasse here.
Yeah, and to just play the race game, I think 15 is just a little bit too much, right? Maybe there's a way. If you draw one more 1-mana burn spell, are you able to deal 15 in 2 turns? I think that should be possible with 6 mana.
I mean, he has to kill something because he's actually facing down 9 points of attackers next turn.
Not if he casts the Lightning Helix.
Ah, okay, yes.
So going up to 11 with Lightning Helix, well, then you still have to hope that there are no more Conflagrates jumping out of Remy's graveyard, no haste Bloodghasts and so on. But I think that's the best way of going about things.
Yeah, at some point when you're making decisions for any deck in Magic, if you know that you're 100% going to lose to a particular card, you just have to play as if they don't have it. Suspends a Riftbolt. That makes sense because that's the one that next turn, if he was sort of waiting to play it later, it wouldn't work out well for him on the timings.
Absolutely.
So 5 cards milled here by Stinkweed Imp.
And those were 5 blanks?
Yeah, we have Golgari Thug, Faithless Looting, Insolent Neonate, Life from the Loam, and another Stinkweed Imp.
There is the Faithless Looting, though. Ah, no, there was a Bloodghast.
That was a Bloodghast, not a Golgari
But is
Thug.
that enough? 6, 10, 11. Yeah, that's actually... That forces Lasse to target... to target a creature, I believe. Yeah, that's 11. So Lasse needs to Lightning Helix the Amalgam, which is very unfortunate because of how close he is to burning out his opponent.
I wonder whether or not he would have been better off Lightning Helixing pre-combat so that Bloodghast would not have haste.
Yeah, that would have been better, but... Well, actually, it would have not only been better, he could have Lightning Helix his opponent in this case.
Yeah, that's
right?
what I mean.
That's a very good play that I completely missed, yes. If he had done that, I think he might be able to win this turn. Let's see what would happen if Remy was on 12 here. He still would need either an untapped mana source or a 1-mana 3-damage burn spell off the top.
Let's have a look. It's an Eidolon on the Great Revel off the top, so as it turns out, it wouldn't have been quite enough.
But a really good lesson here. If you are just barely below 10, then Lightning Helix might actually have a secret mode.
Target creature loses haste. Sounds like a Robo Rosewater card. Doesn't happen too often that you have such a narrow ability on a card. So Remy Lefrancois here somehow needs to find 3 points of damage with his 5 creatures on the board.
Yeah, and he can also, in addition, dredge into Conflagrate, because Life from the Loam is just always 3 points of damage, basically. There's also another Bloodghast. This time Lightning Helix will not prevent that from attacking. Oh, what a close game when we think about it.
Surprisingly close considering how not remotely close it looks. Life from the Loam getting back lands, which in turn get back Bloodghast. It's a cavalcade of cards entering and then indeed leaving the graveyard for Remy Lefrancois. That's pretty much what this deck does.
Okay.
Firing on all cylinders, Remy Lefrancois picking up game 1 against Lasse Andersen, and these players will be going to their sideboards.
And these players are on table 5. So based on these tiebreakers, I'm looking at 68% for Lasse and 66.7% for Remy. They are not guaranteed, nothing is ever guaranteed, but they are very likely, they can feel very comfortable that a win will put them into the top 8.
Now it looks like Lasse Andersen here checking out a Grafdigger's Cage in his sideboard. That one, a solid enough card against what Remy Lefrancois are trying to do. It's not the most terrifying of all of the graveyard hate options available in Modern, but that's partly because there are some very, very potent sideboard cards available in total when you start looking at Modern decks.
I think the scariest card for Dredge is always the Black Leyline, but it's understandable that the Burn player is not running Black Leylines. Grafdigger's Cage also doubles up against the Collected Company decks, which I think is a big reason for playing it.
Yeah, and an efficient way of going in terms of figuring out the best 15 for the entire room rather than focusing on just a single deck and hoping to turn a match around.
Also, the Burn deck doesn't really mind. Doesn't really entice Remy to bring in artifact removal. So it doesn't really. It's not such a big problem that the Grafdigger's Cage can be destroyed by artifact removal. Whereas other decks, you know that there will be disenchant effects or shatter effects coming in anyway, which makes Grafdigger's Cage a liability because the graveyards will just grow.
An excellent point there, and it looks like Remy Lefrancois actually has a crib sheet with him to help him with making decisions about how to sideboard. That is allowed. You can carry notes with you, and indeed being able to lighten the mental load a little bit by having at least a baseline plan for what to do in various matchups with you means that you can focus on the really difficult decision making.
Yeah, especially for Dredge, where you have so many options always, and sometimes the only way to really put cards into your deck is to cut not one card completely, but to shave off some numbers, and this becomes really complicated also to keep track of. Which 4 off can I have only 3 of? Which 3 off can I have only 2 of? I remember this from our Team Unified experience. Sideboarding with Dredge is not such an exact art form, not exact science.
Now, Deflecting Palm is a card that Lasse Andersen is considering here. Kind of an interesting one. Obviously, at its most potent when someone's attacking with a gigantic creature, but it looks like it might be something that he thinks is good enough in this matchup.
But why?
In my experience, the biggest creatures that are ever attacking in this matchup tend to be 3/3 prized amalgams, at which point you're kind of getting an extra Lightning Helix, I guess.
Yeah, but he's taking out Skullcracks for it, which are actually great against Gnaw to the Bone, which Remy relies on to play a longer game. So it's surprising to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that part of that may come down to Lasse Andersen perhaps forgetting about the existence of Gnaw to the Bone.
No, it's against Conflagrate.
Ah, okay, yes.
That has to be the reason, because Conflagrate is such a backbreaker. It can't be targeted at creatures. This wouldn't make any sense. You don't want your Deflecting Palm to prevent a 2 or 3 power creature from dealing damage to you. Of course, if necessary, you will use it if you survive that way. but stopping huge conflagrates is actually worth it.
And I bet that those deflecting palms have done fantastic work in other matchups already this weekend as well, because there are some very, very large creatures attacking in this particular modern format.
You can even beat the infinite combo maybe when they finish you with Izuri. You just throw that devoted druid back at them basically. That's probably not the card for the matchup, but it's still fun. We do see some burn lists with main deck deflecting palm, one or two of them.
Yeah, one would imagine that burn versus that particular combo, there's a point where one or other creature is just being cast and you can kind of respond by killing off the other half of the combo, being probably the most efficient way for burn to do it, even though burn is loath to point any of its burn at things other than the opponent's face. All right, these two drawing their opening hands. Let's hope that we get C7s from both of them, get a good old game of Magic in for this potentially deciding game between these two, trying to make top 8 here in Copenhagen. Lasse Andersen does not like his 7, goes down to 6. Meanwhile, Remy Lefrancois still checking out his options.
He has a lightning axe at the front of his hand, which is kind of nice. You get to discard maybe a dredger on turn 1 while dealing with a pesky goblin guide. That's a very mana efficient way of getting the dredge chain going.
And Goblin Guide is one of the cards that in principle represents the most damage for mana spent if it can hang around.
You could argue that Monastery Swift is competing with that, but Goblin Guide doesn't require any other influence to just be 2 a turn.
All right, 6 cards now for Lasse. He has his fingers crossed, at least figuratively, if not literally. Sees a Monastery Swift Spear, sees some lands. That's going to be good enough. And I guess that if he knew that he was going to use the Bloodstained Mire anyway, then there wasn't too much that seeing it on top of his deck was going to change there.
There's actually a little downside. If you're playing Modern, the Scry Mulligan is not always something you can make use of, because the cost of not casting something on turn 1 is just too high.
Anderson going to 17. Does have Swift Spear to hit in for just the 1 point here. Let's see what Remy Lefrancois has going on. Game 1, he had a pretty ideal start, really, with Insolent Neonate immediately letting him dredge. Let's see whether or not he can do the same thing here. Is Insolent Neonate the premium 1-drop for this deck? Faithless Looting is another option, I suppose.
If we're talking about the ordering, you want to start with the Neonate, because Faithless Looting doesn't... Well, it puts the dredge cards into the graveyard, but it's much better to use when you already have a dredge card in the graveyard. Whereas the Neonate is just good as the very first play of the game.
Because I guess it has the rummage ability, makes you discard then draw, which if you've got a dredger in hand is kind of ideal.
Exactly. Lasse drew a land, so that's a good start.
2 dredgers in the graveyard for Remy Lefrancois, so both these players getting a little bit going here. Monastery Swift Spear simply attacking in though, that's signaling that if there's another spell coming in, more likely to be a creature than an instant or sorcery.
Yeah, that should be the Eidolon. And then we will see how beneficial that Eidolon really is in this matchup.
I can see a Cathartic Reunion in hand for Remy Lefrancois here. His turn 2 could feature a lot of dredging.
But his graveyard is not really set up for the massive dredge that you want to achieve. If he dredges, for example, here the Life from the Loam in his draw step, and there's not a Stinkweed Imp to be found, do you even cast the Cathartic Reunion with the... Well, you probably do, but it's risking actually to not be all that efficient.
So Lightning Axe to deal with Eidolon the Great Revel. Yes, you're going to take a couple of points on the way out, but I think that that's a reasonable exchange here. Getting the Prize Amalgam in the graveyard is exactly what you want to be doing anyway. Bloodghast and Conflagrate alongside a Gemstone Mine going to the graveyard off that Life from the Loam dredge.
Yeah, no dredgers, but still a great hit there. Oh, okay, of course. Remy had to Lightning Axe in his upkeep. So this turn, Cathartic Reunion was not really an option anyway.
Lasse Anderson looks like he's got another Eidolon if he wants it. Has to consider the Conflagrate already in Remy Lefrancois' graveyard, though.
Conflagrate is such a scary card. It's also the most scary card for Death Shadow. It just completely changes like the reach of the Dredge deck. It's not really a creature deck. It's this kind of weird zombie recursion deck that then burns you out for 10 if the game goes out too long.
The Wombo Zombo combo.
Zombo combo. And Lasse is already thinking quite hard about how he's even going to raise this.
Well, step one, hit the red zone with your red creature. That Bloodghast cannot block. And there is Eidolon the Great Revel. If the first one was good enough to kill, then presumably the second one also. Another Lightning Axe. What's the discard going to be here from Remy Lefrancois? Life from the Loam seems a good temptation, and he does go for it. Remy taking little pecks every time he has to kill off one of those Eidolons. Oof. Again with the Dredge finding a Narcomoeba, well, in this case a Narcomoeba, but in either case a creature that can come into play from the graveyard alongside Prized Amalgam.
This is extremely similar to what we saw in game one. First the Bloodghast to get back the first Amalgam, now the Narcomoeba to get back the second. There's already the Conflagrate waiting. Remy actually used the Lightning Axis against the Eidolons, otherwise he could also now just be Flashback and Conflagrate.
So Cathartic Reunion, one of the discards was Haunted Dead, another way of getting creatures back into play from the graveyard. Lots of dredging going on here.
Yeah, had to find another Dredger there, otherwise he would have been forced to draw a card regularly.
Collective Brutality, another card that's pretty good against burn, another way of discarding cards that you want to get into the graveyard. I like the way that this looks for Remy Lefrancois here.
These dredges were not all that great. If you look at the cards he hit, which of these are really relevant? There is the Life from the Loam, okay, Haunted Dead, and that's pretty much it. The Conflagrate was already there, so if we're counting like, let's say, relevant cards, it weren't the best dredgers. On the other hand, if you consider that he had only a Dredge 2 and a Dredge 3 in his graveyard overall, he's actually lucky to have been able to hit that many dredgers in a row.
Yeah, it's funny in many respects. His Dredge of Life from the Loam at the start of the turn far more impactful than anything that Cathartic Reunion was able to achieve. But one way or another, if you're just simply looking at life total available here and points of damage on the board, Remy Lefrancois in good shape. Lasse Anderson is going to struggle to attack through that Monstrous Sphere unless he wants to point removal somewhere other than just Remy Lefrancois' head here. Lightning Helix and Boros Charm in hand. Would need the land to be able to cast both. And Remy Lefrancois kind of erecting a wall in terms of that graveyard in between him and his opponent here.
Yeah, I think for dredge players, the graveyard plays such an important role that it's actually not a bad thing to put it like this.
And to be honest, as an opponent of a dredge player, I don't like the feeling that maybe I'm missing something that's in my opponent's graveyard because it's tucked away. I'm quite happy to see it there as well. And of course, for us watching at home, it doesn't hurt either.
Lasse didn't crack his fetch land, so he wanted to stay on above 10 life.
We're just hearing that this is apparently Remy Lefrancois' first ever GP. Whatever work he's been doing practicing with this dredge deck has paid off in spades for him here, because he may have 100% conversion rate on GPs entered to GP top 8s after this game even. Goblin Guide back on defense for Lasse Anderson. Not a great sign for him. Life from the Loam, dredging. Hits a Stinkweed Imp and a Dakmor Salvage. The dredge hits keep on coming.
Lasse could have attacked here, right? 6, 7, 8, 9. He wasn't facing lethal. If the Narcomoeba doesn't block, he deals 3, maybe 4 if he casts the Lightning Helix. I thought that would have given him a better shot at just top-taking his way out of this game.
Is this a Conflagrate concern, do we think? The Conflagrate is still in that graveyard.
3,
Cast just
6, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, not if you Lightning Helix. Well, yeah. Maybe with the Life from the Loam, I didn't do the math. But if you Life from the Loam, then Remy will need like one more land in play as well. It's just, you know, what's your game plan now? Blocking. Your opponent is on 13. I don't see how you're stabilizing here unless you put Anger of the Gods into your Boros Burn deck.
A controversial choice. While it's great at dealing with creatures, not very good at killing opponents. Lasse Anderson here, having a good old read of Conflagrate, reminding his opponent that it's there in case there was any doubt.
Oh, Remy knew it was there. Remy is very aware of the Conflagrate in his graveyard.
Lasse Anderson here, flailing in the face of everything that this dredge deck has going on. His creatures did not attack there, which means they might as well be blocking, otherwise effectively he pseudo-pacifismed himself.
Yeah, and that's actually a double chump block. I think the players are also getting a bit exhausted from all this modern play.
It's been a long weekend.
Yeah, 15 rounds, two grueling days, and for one of these players there are 3 more matches to play, maybe up to 3.
Hopefully 3 for whoever it is.
Dredge in the finals of GP Kobe. I said it before. It's something you have to consider a tier 1 deck.
I mean, basically for almost the entire history of Dredge, the worst thing that you can do against Dredge is to forget that it exists, because at that point it will come out and give you all sorts of bother. It's the last of our matches going on here. We will have our top 8 announcements soon enough. These players just scrabbling to find whatever they can in order to keep this going. If you're Lasse Anderson here, what do you need to string together in order to win this game?
Like I said, by not attacking Remy last turn, I think he's not giving him enough reach. If you are drawing running Lightning Helixes, do you actually beat the attacks for 10 each turn? I don't think so.
So Remy on 10 now. Lasse draws 3-point burn spell.
No, he's only 1 mana and 1 3-point burn spell away from winning, but that could just as well be as far as you would take it. Now what he can do is he can bluff a deflecting palm, but I don't think that's going to work out too well.
Yeah, we have 3, 6, 8, 9, 10 damage on the board, and that's before you worry about Conflagrate.
Yes, but this is the situation where, in theory, a card like Deflecting Palm can win you the game that no other card can.
5 cards getting milled here. Bloodghast going to the graveyard, a pretty relevant one. Narcomoeba immediately coming in. Life from the Loam will find a land such that the Bloodghast can come into play.
Yeah, and then you pre-combat Conflagrate to bring your opponent below 11 if possible. And then just imagine the glorious Deflecting Palm.
So 4 cards in hand here. Lefrancois carefully counting things up. In some respects, when you feel this far ahead is the time that you end up spending the longest doing the calculations, because it's very painful to suddenly lose it on a silly mistake.
Yeah, but you need to discard all 4 cards if you want to play around Lightning Helix here. You want the final Bloodcast to also get haste.
All 4 straight to the dome. And when Lasse Andersen drops to 7 here, this must be the point that Remy Lefrancois knows that it's on the cards, and the handshake immediately from Lasse Andersen as soon as Remy Lefrancois goes for that big attack. Remy Lefrancois advancing to 13-2, 12-3 for Lasse Andersen, but what a first GP for Remy Lefrancois there with his dredge deck.
Very impressive, well played. I think Remy really demonstrated how this modern dredge deck is playing, and also how it's beating one of the tier 1 decks of the metagame in Burn.
So that is the last match that we have from our round here. It's a huge achievement for any of these players that have been able to advance to the record they need for top 8. Martin Müller we saw winning against Martin User. These guys, they have just completed the game. We are going to have a top 8 announcement for you soon, but prior to that we're going to get a little bit of replay magic, the only replay that we've had all weekend, just as we prepare for our top 8 here at Grand Prix Copenhagen.
Always know the right play to make? Show off your skills at a local preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. With over 500 game stores worldwide running PPTQs, find an event near you at magic.wizards.com/PPTQ.
Looking for a place to hang out and play Magic? Head to your local game store this and every Friday to play Friday Night Magic events. Get more info at magic.wizards.com/FNM.